we need better media literacy in this
The
country.
majority of the population lacks critical thinking skills.
Don't have reading comprehension skills.
Turns out none of you guys can read.
Gen Z can't read.
The elite college students who can't read books.
I lost the ability to read.
I know y'all skim when you read.
Reading that are like, I just read to turn my brain off. I don't think critically about what I read.
And any form of literary discussion is moving away from deep analysis.
Now we've got a media literacy crisis.
Okay, but why should you want to read critically? I think my main reason might be a controversial one, but it's actually just because it's fun. Many people have this idea that reading critically is hard or boring. Maybe you don't even read at all because you're kind of intimidated by it. But here's the thing. Imagine that it is a hot, sweltering summer day and you have the choice between either dipping your toe in a lake or just completely wading in the cooling water, making waves, playing mermaids. Which one would you choose? Reading critically is like completely submersing yourself in that lake. It is just the better experience. You get so much more out of the story. Maybe you're thinking, no, Leonie, it's just too hard for me. Like, I probably can't do that. No, stop thinking that. You can, okay? Big tech would love for you to believe that you cannot think critically and that you just want to turn your brain off and doom scroll the whole day, okay? There are many people out there that would love for you to believe that you have nothing interesting to say. But today I'm going to show you that engaging critically with the books that you read is actually fun and easy to do. We're going to make sure together that you get the most out of the books that you read and just let it be your escape of the crazy internet. And now I'm gonna get out of this forest before someone sees me and looks at me awkwardly. Yeah, wearing my artsy oversized shirt to really show you that I'm an intellectual. Hello everyone, my name is Leonie. As of this month, I've been making book reviews on the internet for 10 years. That's a very long time, and I want to share my thoughts and insights. So I'm going to share with you 5 steps towards reading critically, and then at the end I will also give you some general media literacy tips, because of course this is all part of like a wider conversation about the need for media literacy also on the internet, or for articles that you read, or for films that you watch. I am not an English major or a literature major at all, so I'm sure that there are very specific academically approved rules to approaching media analysis and literature comparison, and that is not what I can share with you. But like I said, I want to keep this video approachable. I just want to share what I do so you can kind of mix and match it and fit it to your own style and what you like to do, because again, the whole point of this in the end is to make your enjoyment, your experience of reading a little bit richer. But before we get comfortable with more critical reading, let's get comfortable on your feet, because this video is sponsored by Bombas. Bombas make incredibly comfortable socks. Their socks have built-in arch support. The material feels very natural, and their socks have no annoying seams, which I really like, and I've been living in their socks because my feet can really tell the difference in quality. But what I am the most fan of is their dressy socks. I don't think an outfit is truly complete without a cute frilly or patterned sock to just really add that final pizzazz. They also have sports ankle socks, which are incredibly comfortable in my running shoes. But the cool thing about Bombas is that every time you purchase from them, they also give an item back to a homeless shelter, because apparently socks is one of the most needed items of clothing there. In total, Bombas have donated over 150 million items to people who need them. And hey, if you lose a sock, you can always make a free exchange or return, even if it's just your washing machine that ate another sock up. There's a 100% happiness guarantee with Bombas. And they ship internationally to over 200 countries. Feel good and do good with Bombas, knowing that your purchase is going to do some real good. And if you're a new customer, you can get a 20% discount if you use my code thebookleo at checkout. So go to bombas.com/thebookleo to get your own pair of comfy and very cute socks. Okay, the first of the 5 steps is actually step 0, and that is that critical reading is not about the type of books you read, it is about how you read them. Talking about reading critically and like the lack of critical reading and media literacy is very trendy on the internet right now, on TikTok, on YouTube, but I'm kind of sensing this vibe that when people are kind of trying to combat this, they do it in the style of like, oh, you want to read more critically? Read these books. And then it's not like books about critical reading, but just like standard classics. Like, oh, you should start with, you know, the classic ones that I keep talking about all the time. It's always Camus or Dostoevsky that they recommend. It's always like, here, start with these classic books so you can read more critically. But that, you know, being critical for a second, and that's a fallacy. Reading critically is something you can do to any book that you read. Picking up a book just because it makes you seem more intellectual and critical will probably even put you more at the risk of not reading it critically at all, because you're just reading it for the expected end result of having read the book instead of actually engaging with the book and the story itself. So that is my step 0, is to pick up any book that you like, literally anything, and you can start implementing the rest of the steps that I'm going to give you. I'm even going to allow Colleen Hoover here, okay? And I just really wanted to emphasize that because I think if you consume a lot of content about like brain rot and the lack of critical reading, you really start to think that this is somehow your own fault, like there's something wrong with your brain, it has rotted away, you're not reading the right type of books. But I do think it's important to, I guess, give a little bit grace to yourself and to other people that often there are like societal failures that have led to this point, like educational failures, where people have not learned the right tools to read more critically or think more critically. There's a lack of source transparency on the internet. Information is going so fast nowadays, you have no time to process anything. Everyone is busy and overwhelmed all the time, so it can be hard to find the energy to actually read a book. No need to shame yourself. Let's all focus on the fact that reading critically is going to enrich your life. It's going to be fun. It's not some kind of homework assignment or something you just shame yourself into because your brain has rotted away. No, we are going to have fun here. Okay, so you got your book that you're going to think you're gonna enjoy reading. And let's move on to the actual steps. Let's start with step 1 to critical reading, and that is slow down. Why am I saying slow down? Because actually I want you to process what you're reading. Reading critically in many ways is kind of the antithesis to what reading has kind of become on the internet, and that is something that has a lot to do with numbers, something that is very focused on how many books you can read in a year, how fast you can read, but that should not be the end goal. The goal should obviously be reading itself. It's not about having read a book, it's about reading a book. I'm not saying it's not possible to read critically if you read fast. I know a lot of people who are very critical readers and they just happen to read super fast and they read hundreds of books every year. I'm not one of those people, but I know that those people exist. What I'm trying to say that if you, yes, watching this video right now, are on BookTok a lot or BookTube a lot, and you see a lot of these people reading a ton of books, it may become very easy to think that that is like the end goal. That is the signifier of being a good reader, a critical reader, that you read a ton. Slow down. Okay, that is not the goal. The goal here is to actually process what you're reading. When you're reading, it's not about getting all those pages in. Sometimes you just read and then you kind of sit and think. It's one of the main reasons that I read so slowly is because when I'm reading, I get constantly distracted by my own thoughts because I'm reading something and it makes me think of something, and then I start thinking about it, and then before I know it, I've just been staring into space for a good 5 minutes thinking about what I've been reading, which I actually like because it means I'm engaging with the book itself. Don't try to focus too much on reading goals. Again, I'm not against the reading goal. I'm not against people who read really fast. If the reading goal helps you to pick up a book when you're not reading, that is great. But if a reading goal is kind of causing you to mostly pick up short books or easier to read books, or avoiding certain books because you know they're not going to help you quickly go towards that reading goal, then you need to start taking a step back and reconsider what you're doing. One of the main reasons people nowadays are not processing what they're reading or consuming in general is because we are just consuming so much information, so much data all day, every day, all the time. It is absolutely impossible for your brain to process all of that. So if you want to actually process what you are reading, you need to be intentional with it. You need to slow down and not let it get gobbled up in the sea of all the things that you are consuming in the day. One of the greatest ways to slow down when you're reading is to actually make annotations. And I could make an entire video about how I annotate my books. And that is exactly what I will be doing. So look forward to that. I am going to make an entire video dedicated to slowing down by reading and making annotations. Step 2 to critical reading is be aware of your own subjectivity. I think a lot of people who get into reading critically forget this because they think if I'm reading critically, then I am the objective person. I'm the objective opinion about all books everywhere. You are not. A book can mean something different to different people, and that is what is so great about them. Yes, there are some more objective ways that you can look at a book, and there are more subjective ways. So how are you going to differentiate between them? I have a few tips. First, you must establish what your subjective opinion actually is. What do you like? What are your faves? For example, when I'm reading a book, I am very aware of the fact that I just really enjoy fantastical elements. I really enjoy a dark, creepy vibe. As soon as a book has atmosphere like that, I am way more likely to enjoy it. I know very weirdly specifically I like it when books contain themes of mist. Or cannibalism, or mushrooms. That's super random, but I know that those things are more likely to make me enjoy a book, and I'm aware of that, and I know that that is very specific to me. Another simple trick to become more aware of your subjectivity is to just ask yourself, would my dad like this book? Would my sister like this book? Would my high school English teacher enjoy this book? It helps you kind of step away from your own thoughts and think about what other people might enjoy or not enjoy about the same book. For example, you may know oh, I really didn't like this book because it was just super plot focused, but I have this friend who really loves plot-based stories with more action and a little less character focus, so I think she would probably really enjoy this book. Okay, so your opinion is subjective. Does that mean you can just never have an opinion about anything ever? Or that there's no way to be critical about a book ever? No, of course not. I would personally translate it to 3 different lenses that you can use to look at a book. The personal lens, the critical lens, and the cultural contextual lens. The personal lens speaks for itself. How do I feel when I'm reading this book? What do I like about this book? Does it have any tropes or genres that I personally just really enjoy or really hate? I think that is this lens that is very prominent on Book Talk and just general book reviewing on the internet. Then we have the critical lens, where you go a little bit more objective, not actually objective, but you go a little bit more into the technicalities of the writing. Maybe the personal lens really loved the book, but the critical lens can say, okay, but was it actually that good? When I read Fourth Wing, my personal lens said, that was incredibly fun. I had a great time, but my critical lens said, okay, but All of the side characters were formulaic. They didn't have any layers. The world building didn't have any layers. That is the critical lens. It is asking yourself, what is the goal of this book? And did it succeed at that goal? Were these characters well developed? Did the author actually show any good craftsmanship in the writing? I think that it is this lens that is mostly associated with traditional book criticism and book reviewing. But in my personal opinion, I think the personal and the critical lens, they always go together. You can't really separate them. You're always going to be influenced by your personal biases and your personal taste. And then the third lens, I personally think is the most fun because I think it sparks the most conversation, and that is the cultural contextual lens. How does this book fit into the broader genre? For example, Babel by R. Kwang is a dark academia novel that is very clearly kind of a response to typical dark academia novels like The Secret History. How does this book fit into the cultural context? For example, romance novels tend to perpetuate a certain view on gender roles. Why and how did I hear about this book? For example, if you're reading Colleen Hoover, you might think about like, oh, why is she so popular on TikTok specifically? You may know that she's a controversial figure. Why is that? Do I see that back in her books or not? Who wrote it and why? What are their limitations? 1984 is a great example where your critical lens might see that this is a book criticizing authoritarian governments, but your cultural contextual lens will take into account that this was written in the 1940s. It's not just about some random made-up fictional future dystopian. It was very clearly published right after the Second World War and during the Soviet Union. But also, it is still very clearly published in the 40s because there are some very clear misogynistic elements to that book. And this also kind of brings me to another reason why it is so important to read critically. I mentioned in the intro mostly that it's really fun and it'll enrich your experience of the books that you read, and that is still true. But I also just in general think that it is a good idea to be a critical citizen of society. To learn to read more critically and engage critically with all media that you assume honestly will make you less likely to fall for propaganda. It'll help you form your own opinions instead of just going with whatever the status quo is. And that is really important to protect yourself and also the people around you. Step 3. If you're watching this and thinking, Leonie, you're giving me all these steps, but I need more concrete examples of what exactly I can do, okay? Step 3 is to just ask questions while you're reading, and I simply made a list of questions that you can ask yourself while reading a book. I don't mean that you have to like sit there with this list next to you. They're just for inspiration. These are questions that I pretty much almost automatically always kind of ask myself when I'm reading. First of all, very obvious, what is the author trying to say? What is the main message and theme? Do we see a worldview or ideology from the author shining through into the story? And do you agree with that worldview? And very importantly, a message that a book gives does not need to be intended by the author. Even a simple, fun romance story exists in a cultural context. You know, a really alpha romance story may not have the intended message of saying men need to be manly like this and women need to be cutesy. That may not be the author's intention, but in the broader context of our society where most romance novels have those two gender roles that perfectly mirror the gender roles that we have in society, the romance novel may certainly underline a certain status quo. Another thing is to ask yourself, does what happened in the book actually fit the message of the book? Example. In a lot of young adult fantasy novels from like a few years ago, there would be this like female empowerment message. You know, there would be like a female warrior. The characters would say empowering things, but at the end of the day, the female character consistently got saved by the male love interest. So the things that are happening in the story actually contradict the message of female empowerment. Another example is when you have those Not Like Other Girls characters from the 2010s that would say like, oh, I don't like girly things, I don't like wearing makeup, I'm one of the boys, but then there would always be a makeover scene and they would always end up wearing like a beautiful princess dress that contradicts the theme of the story. So what the author tries to say and what the book ends up messaging may not always align. This is also what death of the author is. Death of the author is one of those things that very often gets misquoted or like misexplained on the internet, but death of the author simply means that whatever the author intended with their work is dead the moment that the work comes into the world and readers are reading it and interpreting it. Like an author may say, no, these two characters are not gay, they are straight, guys. But everyone who reads the book can clearly see the homoerotic tension between the two characters, and now you have 1,000 fan fictions and a huge fandom. Death of the author. Next, how does this book fit into the literary period? Jane Austen's books famously critique 19th century high society social etiquette. How does this book fit into greater literary patterns? Like I said, there's a clear pattern in the gender roles in most romance novels. Most fantasy books tend to have a certain hero's journey, a certain type of character that is the main character. Fairy tale retellings obviously all follow certain patterns. Does the book defy a genre in a certain way? Usually, if a book can break certain genre rules or do something differently from what most books are doing, that is a sign of a very original novel. If the book gets recommended on TikTok a lot, you can ask yourself, why? How does this book fit into a TikTok trend? Or why is this book so algorithm friendly? Ooh, another important thing. What is the goal of the book? What is this book actually trying to do? Don't go hating on a romantasy novel for having too much romance in it. Don't hate a literary fiction about kind of shitty people for having characters that are too unlikable. It all comes back to differentiating between that personal lens and that critical lens. Like, did you not like that character because they were flat and poorly written? Or did you just dislike that character because they reminded you of that girl in high school that was mean to you? Sometimes a book is just not for you, and that is okay. Doesn't mean that it is objectively bad and no one should read it. Some more kind of personal questions you can ask yourself. Why did I like this character? Why did I dislike that character? Are the plot twists actually plausible? For example, when I read 5th Season, the plot twists in there were amazingly foreshadowed, and if you reread the book, you will see all the foreshadowing. But I've also read books where the plot twist comes and I'm like, this is so far-fetched. Like, I don't believe it. What makes me want to keep reading this book? What makes me want to pick this book up after I've put it down? Is it the beautiful writing style that you love, or is it more the edge on your seat mystery? Like, for example, personally for me, I've noticed that what really makes a book a page turner for me is actually if there's a romance. Like, romance is like the #1 reason for me to speed through a book, because I just want to see the romance get resolved. So I know for me personally, speeding through a book is not necessarily an accurate measurement of how good I thought the book was. There are books that take me super long to read that I loved, but when I speed through a book, it usually just means that I was really invested in the romance. What is keeping me from giving this book 5 stars? What is keeping me from reading this book 1 star? Again, for me personally, I know that a 5-star book is purely a personal thing. Like, a book just has to have a certain je ne sais quoi. It just needs to hit a certain nerve in my brain. But you might have other reasons. And lastly, what style of writing is this? Is it quick and simple, or is it very lyrical and flowery? And how does that fit the book? For example, a lot of fairy tale retellings tend to have this kind of flowery writing style that really creates atmosphere. But for example, Sally Rooney very famously doesn't use quotation marks in her dialogue. Personally, she says that she doesn't see the use of them, but I think that they also aid her story because it takes away a kind of imminence from her dialogue. It makes it feel a little detached, which fits the type of characters that she writes about. Okay, that was a very long list. I will say, I think a mistake a lot of people make is that they think that in order to read critically, the main thing that you need to do is just find out the hidden meaning of the book. Which, don't get me wrong, is an interesting thing to think about, but it's also okay to focus on other things. I personally really agree with Susan Sontag's idea on this. She writes about in our essay Against Interpretation that sometimes when you go only digging for the meaning behind what you're seeing, you are kind of excavating the work of art. You are just taking it apart too much. It's good to not only focus on the content of a book, but also the form, the aesthetic part of it. How does it make you feel? How do you like the words? How do you like the writing? Maybe even do you like how the book is formatted? I guess we could compare this to like the famous "the curtains are blue" discourse. I don't want to get into it too much, but the meme was always like, oh, your English teacher says, no, the curtains weren't just blue, it was a metaphor for their sadness. And then the memes are like, no, maybe the curtains were just blue. And nowadays there's a lot of discourse of people saying like, oh, that meme really stopped people from thinking critically, because no, maybe the curtains weren't just blue, maybe there really was a reason behind that. I would say step one of critical thinking is to think, no, maybe really those curtains were a metaphor for sadness and depression. And then step two of critical analysis would be like, yeah, well, maybe indeed the curtains were just blue. Maybe I don't wanna like dig deeper into a meaning that isn't there. But also, the curtains are blue is kind of a shitty sentence. That's a not a very well written sentence right there. My gosh, oh, I really didn't expect this video to be this long. Anyway, we are moving on to step 4, which I think is maybe the most important one, and that is how to find meaning into the book, because we can talk endlessly about how to read more critically, because whatever, you're gonna seem so intellectual, but in the end, the goal here is for you to really enjoy the book and find meaning in it. Ask yourself, what does this book mean to you? Does it make you think of something in your own life? After you finish the book, what have you learned? Has it changed your perspective on anything? A book doesn't need to be a philosophical masterpiece to be meaningful to you specifically. You can find meaning in any story. A great example for me is the Shadow and Bone series, which I've often talked about not finding that good anymore, but it was the very first fantasy book that I ever read, so it has a lot of meaning to me. I will cherish it forever as being my introduction into big magic and like other worlds. In the end, what the story means to you personally is worth the most. And it's a great opener for conversations with others. If you're not sure how to find meaning in the book that you're reading, talk to others about it. Talking to other people can help you figure out your own thoughts. And it also helps you see that other people have different perspectives, bringing it back to using those different lenses to look at a book. Now, where to talk to people about books? Here's a few rapid fire ideas. Join a book club in your local town. Join a book club online. Start a buddy read with a friend. Or even watch BookTube or BookTok videos about the book. Actually engage with those videos, comment on them. Maybe even start making your own videos so you can share all your thoughts about the books that you're reading and find an online community. That's literally why I started this channel 10 years ago, because I had thoughts about the books that I was reading and I just wanted to share them with other people. Now that you found your personal meaning in this book and you can talk about it to other people, that brings us to our last and final step, step 5, and that is how to have to say something about the books that you read. Okay, so you're talking to other people. What do you say? What do you talk about? Now, if you follow the last steps, you've probably already formed your own opinion. You already have something critical to say about the book. You can already fit it into some cultural context. Right there, you have something to say already. But here are just a few final tips to help you having something to say about the books that you read. Like I mentioned before, the question of do you agree with what the story is trying to say is a perfect conversation starter. Let's take it back to 1984. If you've read that, you can see its anti-authoritarian message. Do you agree with it? And why do you agree with it? These are the kind of books that can really start long and amazing discussions. And secondly, I think the best tip on creating new ideas and having opinions on things is just, can you connect it to something else? Can you connect two separate ideas? For example, Babel and Blood Over Brighthaven are both books, fantasy books, that use fantasy to critique colonialism. Connect those two. In what ways are they doing it differently? In what ways are they similar? You can talk about that. Blood Over Brighthaven is pretty much a direct metaphor for exploitative colonialism. That's you connecting the book with colonialism. You can talk about that. How do you connect what happens in this book to things that happen in real life? You can have a conversation about that. Wow, you're gonna be so smart and cool and make a lot of friends talking about books. Oh my gosh. Wow, got a little too excited there. And lastly, it's always okay to just look up spark notes on a book. Look up a video essay about it. See what other people have written about the book. See what other people have already analyzed about it. You don't have to do all of it yourself. Okay, now that we have all these tips on how to engage more with the books that you read, I just wanted to end on some general tips on media literacy. And again, for the sake of media literacy, I am of course not an expert on this. I am just a person like you that is trying to be a little bit more aware of the things that I consume. And these are just the things that I do, or tips that I've accumulated from other places over the years that have really helped me be a more conscious consumer. The first, I think the most basic thing that you can do to increase your media literacy is to check the source of what you're reading. Where does it actually come from? Who is saying it? That article you're reading, that random thing that you found somewhere on the internet, where is it actually coming from? Does this TikToker actually know what they're saying, or are they just regurgitating something they heard somewhere else on the internet? What does the person that is publishing this or saying this gain from saying what they're saying? Sometimes people have a very obvious political agenda, or they are backed by political partners, or they're sponsored. Even for example, if I have a sponsored video like this video, you have to understand that I am being paid to say the things that I'm saying. If we bring it back to reading, obviously a positive review from just a random person on the internet, you would read differently than a positive review from the publisher themselves, or like a friend from the author, because they have a personal agenda in saying something positive about that book. And of course, nowadays, maybe you can't even find the source of the information that you're reading. If you are getting your information from an AI summary or from ChatGPT, you don't even know where the information is coming from. And it's really hard to be critical of what you're reading if you don't even know where the information is coming from in the first place. It always helps to ask yourself, who benefits from making me believe this or making me feel this way? It's always good to kind of check your own emotional response and be mindful of how you are emotionally responding to whatever you're reading. You know, are you getting really angry at it? Is the piece you're reading making you hate someone else or something else? Is it making you disgusted about something? Any kind of really big emotion, honestly, should give you a little bit of pause and makes you think, how is this person or this piece of media benefiting from me responding this way? Again, if you are just watching an amazing Netflix show and you are crying in response, obviously they benefit because you are watching a show that is really good apparently and is making you very emotional. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good that they benefit from your like intense response to that beautiful new season of Bridgerton. But if, let's say, it's a political piece and it's making you really angry at certain groups of people, you might want to rethink that. On the internet, you will constantly see people be extra outrageous in their opinion just to rage bait or to get you to actually watch the TikTok or the video, because they benefit if you feel a little shocked or outraged by what they are saying. So yeah, that is like law number one for media analysis. Media literacy is, where is this information coming from and who benefits from sharing this information with the world. With all the tips that I gave in the rest of the video about like learning to find the main message of a piece of media, learning to find the main theme, you could think to yourself, okay, and then what is the point of bringing this message into the world? Who benefits from that? For example, if you're watching just a general TikTok recipe video, which I do all the time, and then they are extremely positive about a certain kitchen utensil that they use, and they happen to have a link to that in their TikTok shop. Classic example, they benefit if they say something positive because they'll make money. Another great thing to ask yourself is, what is missing in what I'm seeing? It's easy to focus on what is in front of you, the text or the video, but what is actually not being said? Maybe there are some important arguments that are being left out that you can think of yourself. Whose voices are being centered and whose voices are left out of the conversation? Comparing perspectives is always a great idea. If you just found out about something new and interesting, read about it somewhere else as well. That's how you get the picture. That's how you make sure you don't just get one biased perspective. You have to compare different perspectives so you can create your own biased perspective. Another thing that I always ask myself, especially when reading non-fiction books or reading essays on the internet, is this based on opinions or is this piece based on facts? Because sometimes people mostly speak from personal experience, which is not a problem. You know, it could be a personal essay, it could be a personal story. And sometimes people speak mostly from source material, from science. You have to learn to be able to differentiate between, is this someone's personal theory that they are sharing with me, or are they sharing some kind of like consensus in science right now? And last but not least, can you find any contradictions in what they're saying? I always find this the most difficult, especially if I'm reading or listening to something that I don't know a lot about. I find it hard to find contradictions because I feel like I personally don't even understand everything yet about this topic. You know, I'm just a beginner on it. I'm just a layman. But if you can find inconsistencies in what they're saying, well, you've won the medal of critical reading. You've won media literacy, I would say. To me, finding inconsistencies requires already having a bit of background info on it. But some people are really good at finding inconsistencies even if they don't yet know anything about the topic themselves. It's hard, I'm working on it. Actually, I have to admit here that I sometimes find it really difficult to read critically because I tend to assume that, oh, I don't really know anything, and this thing that I'm reading right now or this thing that I'm watching, they seem to know a lot about it, so I'm sure they know more than me. I have this tendency when I spot an inconsistency to just assume that I'm just not understanding it correctly, and I'm kind of learning over the years that that is just not always true. That just because you are reading something that someone wrote down or filmed, especially on social media, doesn't necessarily mean that they know what they're talking about. So you always have to remain critical and I guess kind of have faith in yourself that you can have something to say about that as well. Also ask yourself, who is the intended audience here? Is this piece of media even intended at me? Like, I would never watch like a big carnivore meat eater's recipe and then get angry and comment and be like, oh my god, but like, I don't eat meat, so what would I do? You think I'm not the intended audience and then you move on. Anyway, I could go on with this list forever and ever, but in the end, it is mostly just gonna come down to what is the source, what is the agenda of the source, and don't just believe anything that you find on the internet. Oh, I love that. I hope you made notes on this video. There's gonna be a test at the end. I will be grading each and every one of you individually. In 2 weeks, I will come out with another video kind of in concordance with this video about annotating and reading to slow down and making notes for self-care. And there I will share all of my note-taking tips with you guys. So I'm really excited to start making that video. Let me know in the comments if you have any specific questions about how I annotate and how I note-take. If you comment them quickly, I can still incorporate them in that video, hopefully. And that being said, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you soon in another video very soon. Goodbye!